when I talk motivated my gang. War cry. They say jealousy kills, but we do the same. War cry. If you listen to the sky, you can hear war cry. War cry. Hope your chief ain't scared, cause it's do or die. War cry. Say this war that morning, we ain't cut no slack. War cry. Take his hat like that and bring it to the back. War cry. Say we get down and dirty, we don't play fair. War cry. We beefing with another tribe, it's war in the air. War cry. Gunshots put the smoke, you can hear the war cry. War cry. You can feel it in the air, somebody might die. War cry. Tell the chief go ahead and move all the kids. War cry. Wild man on the loose, he might split your way.
Count it in.
Thank you. All right, well, welcome everybody, humans and avatars alike. My name is Fabian Brown. I just want to say thanks for being here and welcome to the Ropeadope Lounge. It's our community meeting space in virtual reality where a community of musicians and artists and fans will all come together. It's funny because a lot of people will think VR as a gaming experience where people can withdraw from reality, but the truth really is it's really just a place for us to hang out and plug in and kind of talk with one another. And I'm joined here with an excellent panel of just great people. I want to start off by welcoming Eric Heigle, drummer, composer, producer. Eric Heigle has balanced his talents and projects to highlight his New Orleans roots with a wider scope of projects. He took home a Grammy as a member of the Lost Bio Ramblers and has dozens of credits on a variety of projects from Snarky Puppy to 79ers Gang, Christian Scott aTunde, Adjuah, Arcade Fire, and just a few of the artists he's worked with in the studio. Eric has also co-produced the new Vada album with our guest Brian Danos that came out in last month, actually in July, which is a great segue. Brian, I want to welcome you to the call. Brian's an electronic musician, a producer. Brian also holds New Orleans close to his home in heart, man. And while he has worked with many traditional New Orleans artists, he brings a present-day interest in tech and electronics to the mix. His new project, Vada, was released in VR with our first human-to-avatar experience. He's released a collection of 30 NFTs on his album cover, actually generated randomly by a software computer program. Which then brings me to Chief Christian aTunde Adjuah. The chief is a big chief in Mardi Gras Indian tradition, a position that gives him the responsibility of direction. His music is celebrated among jazz traditionalists, adventurous listeners, and those that follow his wisdom and direction in social and a lot of cultural circles. His gift is of historic narrative, and he has worked many years to enlighten others using music as a method for human understanding. And I'd be remiss if I did not have a second to introduce Mr. Bill Summers. Bill Summers brings profound longevity and continuous exploration to music. A member of the first iteration of Herbie Hancock's Headhunters, writer on film scores, The Color Purple and Roots, and a member of Los Hombres Calientes. Summers has explored the roots of rhythms through percussion and the powerful tradition that is carried forward. Bill Summers is also an ambassador, a teacher for those who are looking for the true story. And that brings us to our virtual VR room, where we find Louis Marks, the self-proclaimed fake CEO of Ropeadope. A so-called record label with over 650 amazing recordings released over the past 21 years. Louis, you're in the room. Can you hear me loud and clear?
I can hear you. Is everything good on your side? Are you hearing me okay?
I'm hearing you loud and clear, Louis. Thanks for being here.
All right. I'm also checking to make sure in control center here to make sure that our live stream is going well. And I'm going to shout out to our tech, Kaya, to make sure that our live stream is actually functioning as it is supposed to. We're simultaneously working this in the metaverse and on live stream on YouTube and Twitter. And so hopefully everything is going well. So welcome everybody. It's great to see some new faces here in the room. Um, I want everybody to read the guidelines if you can, and on the way in to the room, and also mute your mics whenever you're not speaking. If you need to go find a quiet space to chat, that's great, or stand a little bit back. I think we have proximity chat on, so we're good. And then I invite everybody to try to connect with us to make sure that we can notify you of future events. We have something coming up next week. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So here's what this is. The Ropeadope Lounge is a new forum for dialogue between humans as avatars or as themselves. That's what it is. That's the definition. But the first thing I want to do is get rid of the definition. I have my cue sheet here, and now it's gone. Bear with me a second. Oh boy. So I was thinking about this and what all this is, right? What is happening in here, and what are we trying to do? And I was thinking about, as a child, you look up at a tree and you just say the tree is so beautiful, and then somebody comes along and tells you that's a maple tree, and that one over there is an oak tree. And the next time you see the tree, your brain goes to the default position of deciding whether it's a maple or an oak, rather than experiencing this new thing in its beauty in the beginning. So I'm just suggesting simply that we call it that. We'll call it what it is, but let's throw out those definitions: avatar, human, VR, fake, real, all of these different words that we use to define things, and just say we're going to make it what it is. And one of the beautiful things about this is that we can talk to each other. And it's funny that this is about New Orleans, but we're in here in VR without our masks, without the masks that we wear every day. And so there are no presuppositions. There are no judgments in here. I see avatars and I don't know who you are. I don't have any social configuration for you at all. So we have an opportunity to talk to each other in a way that we haven't been able to talk before. And that's what we want this place to be. And we're going to make it what it is. New Orleans, first, welcome to everybody, and thank you so much for being here. I did a little bit of study on New Orleans, and of course realized immediately that it was impossible for me to give you anything truly informative and comprehensive about the city. But I did look up and find some really interesting things, and you can see on the wall behind me, I want to say chimichata. The first thing I learned is that the original
Chiti
trunk
matcha.
of
Chiti matcha.
sorry,
Chiti matcha.
say again.
Chiti matcha.
Chikimacha. Sorry, I said it backwards. Yeah. So those are people that, these are things that we didn't learn in school, or at least I didn't. They have been on this land, in that land, for something like 6,000 years. And there was a rather interesting part that I noticed. They are a matrilineal kinship system, right? So that means that all the lineage comes down through the mother. And so I think some of the first parts, I see someone raising their hand, and I'd like to say, are we just saying hello?
Hey, I can't hear the presentation at all.
On screen?
Yeah,
Okay.
just heads up.
Some guidance would be to go to the settings. Are you seeing it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
I
So
just
go
can't
to
hear anything that's being said.
Yeah, environmental volume on 0. Turn it up.
Oh, got you. I'm so sorry. Okay.
No, that's great. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So I keyed in on that fact because, a matrilineal system means that there can be intermarriage, if you will, and a mixture of cultures right out of the gate. So anyone who, and Christian, please feel free to correct me if again if necessary. But I found it interesting because it begins the blending, the melting pot. Who are the people who are in New Orleans today, and what is their lineage? And we see that the lineage was mixed. some other key points, and my notes have disappeared here that I found. Bear with me. This is all fun. You guys can't see what I'm pointing at, but there we go. Much better. Also found an interesting piece on Wikipedia about the original French colonization of the area, Louisiana, bigger than it is today, what we know as Louisiana today. And there's a decree called Code Noir, and that decree defined the relationship and the rules for slave owners in the province. And one of the things was forced Catholicism, so that has some bearing onto how the area is shaped up. And the other is putting an end to who has a decision about who's free and who is not. So, you know, to kind of end this portion, there's just a couple points, and I'll post a couple more. It's really interesting to go and find little bits of history that have not been discussed in the American narrative, and try to piece together what really happened. But I think for me, what I see there is that it's a combination of folk, cultural intermingling, underneath the system of oppression of the colonizer, and the rules that people have to abide by. And that, to me, is what makes New Orleans particularly interesting and unique. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Brown, and we can begin. Just sort of, let's start at the beginning.
Well, thanks again, Louis. I really appreciate that breakdown. And, you know, I'm curious, guys, you know, we, first of all, again, thank you for your time and your talent being here. There's 1,000 things that you could be doing, but we really appreciate, again, your voice and information about what's going on. And I guess I'll start off with as I did with the introductions. Eric, you know, I'll bring it to you. You know, I would love to hear a little bit about, you know, your experience with New Orleans, and, you know, the take that you have from your point of view and your position on your voice and what you would like to share.
Sure. You know, it's, in some ways, the music and the culture is a bit like a unicorn, in that, like, I'm from Metairie, you know. I wasn't raised in a musical tradition. You know, my family used to go to Mardi Gras on like St. Charles and Napoleon area. Little did I know that just a block from there, 2 blocks from there, Second and Dryads, which is like the uptown converging point for all of the Mardi Gras Indian tribes on Mardi Gras Day. And so, you know, I've been playing music since I was a teenager, playing shows live and within the city, but it wasn't really until like my mid-20s that I really started to like dig into the indigenous musical cultures of New Orleans, being brass band and Mardi Gras Indian and even like bounce and things like that, you know. And so that makes me maybe a little bit of a newcomer to it, I guess you could say, but it sort of blew my mind. And from that point forward, really, like, my intro to the Indian thing was like through Big Chief Monk Boudreaux and just being a for hire drummer. And then I started to just dig a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. And to me, it's like this endless well of inspiration that is sort of in the soil and in the water here. And in terms of creating new ideas and new styles and evolving the music, to me anyway, having something that's rooted in such culture and history as sort of the basis upon which we expand and evolve makes the music here as rich and as has as much potential as really anything on earth. You know, the possibilities are endless, really.
That's wonderful. You know, and again, I don't want this, guys, I would love to hear the conversation, the voices of all of you. You know, I don't really have much prepared as far as questioning goes, because you guys are all, listen, I have so much respect and profound, you know, here's my intention, is to really understand and learn how the culture and the community of New Orleans has personally affected and evolved your influences and shaped your music. You know, Eric, I really appreciate your thoughts on that as well. You know, Christian, Brian, Bill.
Well, yeah, I have a couple things to offer. You know, I was just listening to you know, part of what Eric intimated, and also part of what Lewis intimated. You know, I think the thing that makes this space so dynamic is its relationship to what has already transpired, right? The past. You know, just as a clarification, you know, that also even interculturally, you know, Eric, you used the term Mardi Gras Indian, which some folks in the culture abhor. They don't want to connect to that, because part of it is, and this is also part of what we're discussing, and also what's being reevaluated in this moment is, you know, we label a culture, a group of people that were denied access to this cultural exhibition, Mardi Gras, and we label them with the term Mardi Gras and also Indian, which is, you know, depending on who you speak to, they're gonna have a different, you know, energy about that. But the point that I'm making is, it's like, really what we're talking about is actually marooning, right? Which is the byproduct of a myriad of things, but mainly West Africans being brought into New Orleans, getting there, and, you know, a lot of them self-liberating and going into the marshlands, and also uniting with some of the Aboriginal tribes that were there. Now, this, even though for initiated practitioners in New Orleanian music, they will know this, more often than not, this is not something that is marked as the cultural beginning of the sound. When to be fully honest and fully transparent, it actually is, right? So it's like, you know, when we speak about this culture in this space, I think that the dominant thing that makes it different from so many other spaces is just that there were so many self-liberated Africans that continue to have relationships with the Africans that were actually in bondage, and they were able to continue to create music and tell their stories and hold on to their rhythms, which when you listen centuries later from those spaces, the things that evolved out of those experiences, that maroonage, you know, you hear Louis Armstrong and Sidney Bechet talk about how they would phrase and try to sound like the Big Chiefs, right? So it's those points of connectivity, I think, that also make it such a unique thing, because, you know, like part of what Louis said about all of these things having to exist in this ecosystem that had oppression as like its overlaying banner to what you're experiencing. You know, my contention would be that part of the music, the reason the music sounds like, is because it never fully respected or acknowledged that oppression. It was always willing to be first, to be free first, you know? And so, you know, if I had to encapsulate what makes that area such a unique thing, I think it's the confluence of all of those things. You know, you talk about, you know, the Aboriginals that were in this space. Obviously, the French came into the space, they brought in Africans, and you have all these cultures mixing, but it's the way that they mixed. You know, he speaks about the Code Noir. You know, you spoke about that in the intro. One of the things that wasn't mentioned was the fact that the main reason for the Code Noir is because you're living in a space that is becoming more and more melanated, and they needed to legislatively create a means to stop certain people from procreating together. That's Europe and Africa, right? So they made it illegal for Africans or indigenous people to procreate with Europeans, but said it was okay for them to procreate with each other, which is another tentacle to what makes the bond between those cultures so strong, because they were allowed, they obviously lived and resisted together, but it was legally sanctioned for them to be able to love as well. So the confluence of all of those things makes a very specific gumbo. And for my money, that's where I would rest the sort of ethnomusicological hat on where the roots of this music actually come from.
That's
Wow.
wonderful.
Well, I'd like to, pass the mic over to Mr. Bill Summers, who is no stranger to this history over time, and I'd like to hear your take.
Well, my hat's off to Christian. We've stepped out on the street together with Big Chief Donald Harrison and the Congo Nation, and it's the real deal.
Bravo.
And man, I want to give you a little history. You know, the first point in the Code Noir was about Jews. Expel all the Jews from the colony. That was number one. It didn't, and I think there's a lot of things that we need to talk about. Christian mentioned Maroons, and there was a place called Place Congo, now called Congo Square, incorrectly, and I think that happened after the Civil War because it was never called Congo Square. It was Place Congo or Place des Nègres, and that's what it was called. And very few people know the leader of the Maroons. Very few people know who the most important black man to go to Congo Square and knew the language, knew the drumming, and knew the dancing. And he is mentioned by Sidney Bechet in his book. He actually says that this guy was his grandfather. His name was Ropeadope. Now, I never hear the word the name spoken by any historians. Very few people know about who he is. He wound up being murdered by a guy named Carlos something, a Spanish guy. He could have been Cuban. But Ropeadope is my hero. He was a combination of Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Marcus Garvey, and any other black man that thought he was a man or a leader. Ropeadope is my hero. But we won't go too much into that. Now I'm gonna give you a little history. I just want to tell you about a little bit of my history. My great grandfather was a signer of the Confederate Constitution. His name is Kenner. I have a book here. His name is Duncan Kenner. Here's a book about him. His name was Duncan Farrar Kenner. He had the largest, he owned a plantation called the Ashland Plantation in a place called Geismar now, near Gonzales. And he had the largest thoroughbred horse stable in the country. And a lot of the black jockeys, like a guy named Abe, what was Abe's last name? I think it was Abe Jenkins. He won the Preakness. Okay, so there's so much history. And then another thing is this thing about Mardi Gras Indians. I don't know how that really started, but and another thing is most of the slaves that came initially, they were from the Congo. Okay, they were from the Congo, and some people came from Haiti because it was a French colony, but a lot of people don't know that the word gumbo, or correctly pronounced, is gumbo, and jambalaya. Those are Congolese words. So there's a lot of things that have to be corrected in the history. We have to. This group that we have on Ropeadope is called Forward Back, and that's what we need to go backwards to go forward, because the history is messed up, and the people that were writing the history didn't know shit. Okay, they didn't know anything. They were bullshitting, and they were taking credit for things that weren't theirs. So we have to go back and reevaluate fairly some of the things that transpired. There was also a society of musicians here in New Orleans of over 100 musicians that could read and write music, and they were Black. And some of the best opera singers and some of the best violinists and some of the best orchestra players were Black. But you don't hear anything about them. You do hear about Louis Armstrong and Sidney Bechet and people like that. And I take my hat off to Christian because he's blazing the trail. Look, there is so much I could say. I'm like bubbling over with stuff, but you know, the conversations, man, look, there's another word. I was raised in Louisiana and Detroit. I have property. I have a farm outside of New Orleans in a place called Darrell, Louisiana. My father grew up on this place. My grandmother my grandfather raised my father. My family came off of plantation, which I visit every week. Okay, I go and sit in the plantation. I have artifacts from under the slave quarters, all kinds of things. So it's a very important aspect of my life. I will die in Louisiana, or my body will be brought here to be buried. This is my home. And I'm very proud of the history, but I must say, as a Black man, very little of the history has yet to be told. One other thing I wanted to say, Fabian,
Thank you.
I was not a member of Los Hombres Calientes, okay? I was the leader of Los Hombres Calientes. I started the band. I recorded the first 2 or 3 albums in my living room. So the ones that went to the Grammys, I recorded those in my house. Irvin Mayfield was a band member. He played with me. I did not play with Irvin Mayfield. Okay, let's just get that straight.
I'll take responsibility. I'll take responsibility for that error.
No, it's not. Most people
owning up to it right now.
It's not an error.
Yeah.
Most people think
Yeah.
that. They think that erroneously. It's okay. I just wanted to correct you.
Well, while we're talking about the narrative, that's important to correct. Please go ahead, Christian.
No, I was just gonna say, you know, just to piggyback off of what the Bible was saying, you know, we're coming behind you, you know, and one of the few things that I talk about all the time with Weedy and my Uncle Danos has always been just wishing I had more time with you as a youth, right? Because, you know, what you're speaking about from the perspective of a Black man appraising what has been said about our history and these histories is 2000% correct. You know, like I just learned things and what it is that you intimated, right? So, you know, because like I grew up as a little kid, you know, I read Treated Gentle, you know, Sidney Bechet's.
Yes, there it is.
You know, and all of these things to try and do my own excavation work, because I could feel almost on a sensory level that a lot of what it was that was being disseminated to me as a youth wasn't actually in alignment with what was going on. Now there were lots of conversation that were sort of you know, back talk, you know, initiated conversations, you know, with my family and grandfather, my uncle, and learning in those ways. But, you know, that's also like only one family's particular trajectory and reality and history, right? So it's like, even as an adult now, looking at the level of things that have been left out of the historical narrative that clearly have a hand in what it is that this music sounds like. You know, like you said earlier, you not only in New Orleans and in Louisiana now, but also have property in Detroit, which harkens to what Lewis was saying earlier about the larger, what Louisiana actually was, right? So it's like now we have all of these sort of truncated micro histories about even just the region, right? When we say Louisianan or a Creole person and all of these things, all of those traditions extending from where you're talking about, a lot of them made their way into New Orleans, and you hear nothing about those traditions now, right? Unless you go into spaces like the Rigolettes and Bassflow and these kinds of areas and go and meet with some of the people that held on to some of the vestiges of their realities before they moved south, you wouldn't know any of those things. So again, I think the work is that everyone should be intentional about excavating and being clear about also the nomenclature and the language that we use around this music, how the word sounds, right? Earlier, when Lewis, when you were speaking about the Aborigines, I made a statement based in how I've heard the word said, right? But at the end of the day, I'm not a person that comes from that tribal space, so that a person from that space may correct me. The point is that I should do my due diligence to go and find out from the sources, if I have the opportunity to, what the reality is. And I think that's part of what the Baba was intimating. And, I just appreciate you for it. I really do wish I had the opportunity in my youth to be around more, but hopefully that's something that could be rectified in the future. Because you're a champion for this music.
Well, Christian, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so well said, and I don't. Excavation is interesting, and it's up to each person to go and find. It's a very difficult world to find truth in these days. There are plenty of places where you can go. Thank God for Wikipedia these days. Seems to be the only non-judgmental spot, which just puts some facts down, unless somebody, of course, manipulates it. But at least there's more information there. But I want to focus on the oral tradition. So, this space allows us the opportunity to hear from elders like yourselves. Excuse me for calling you elders, uh, both or all of you, but you all have a unique perspective and information that is not particularly available in the common narrative. So this process of talking through and hearing from different voices is a really important part of that understanding. It's not just grabbing facts on your own and making your own decision, because a lot of times that decision can easily be informed by what your previous definitions are, right? So it's really great to hear you guys talk about this in this space, and I hope that we can continue to do that. Each of you, Christian and Bill, have been able to process music and understood a particular tradition, but have managed to push it forward. And I'd like to, as we come back from a break, I do want to open up the mic to anybody in the room who would like to come up and ask a question. But as we come back from the break, I want to talk about, why you're able to change on a regular basis rather than stick with the tradition and play it over and over again, and also how that leads to the New Orleans of today. But first, let me open it up. Is there anyone here who would like to come up and ask any one of our guests a question? Mic is open. I think you have to come up, and Xian over here will give you access. There's a hand. Mm-hmm.
That looks
Xian,
like
can you
Osama
give
bin Laden.
full microphone access? No, his avatar's gone. Yeah. We're working on giving him the mic. I think if you just walk up close to this gentleman over here, that if you're close to him, you can look up.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Can you hear what I'm saying?
I can hear you. Can you guys hear him?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, well, this question is for I haven't read the book, so I can't really have a discussion with you on it, but I'm curious about it. There's a book that came out by LSU Press. You mentioned Brad Coupe. There's a book from LSU Press about basically entirely about him. I just wanted to see if you read it and if you had an opinion on how accurate it might be, because I know. Oh, okay, look at that. Okay, well, yeah. So how
that's the
your
book.
opinion on the book? That's
Yeah.
the book. Okay.
Brian Wagner. Are you asking me about the book?
Well, yeah, no, I couldn't see I couldn't see that you had held it up earlier.
There's the book.
Yeah, I just wanted to. So, okay, well, good. Okay, well, great.
Yeah, I know the guy that wrote it well.
So you have a positive opinion of the, I guess, the history that's represented in the book and
Yes, I do. I
accuracy.
know. I've read the book 10 times, at
Okay.
least. At least. I know the book backwards and forwards.
Okay.
And the most important chapter was written by Sidney Bechet, the last chapter in the book.
I see. Okay. I didn't connect that earlier when you were talking about it. I didn't connect that was the book you were talking about. Okay. Well, thank you.
I wasn't talking about the book. I was talking about the man, because the book
Okay.
had the book. Let me tell you about the book, and I'll make this very short. It is different stories by different people who knew something about the history of Bras Coupé. Most of them were prejudiced, racist white people. Okay, Bras Coupé was hated by most people, especially in the government in New Orleans. It's the mayor had his body when Bras Coupé was finally murdered. His body was brought to the mayor of New Orleans, who put it on display for weeks at the cathedral. What's that famous cathedral in the French Quarter?
St. Louis.
St. Louis Cathedral, right? Well, the mayor at the time displayed his body, but before they put his body out there, they mutilated him, and then they brought all of the enslaved people in the area to view his body. They were forced to go to see this man who was castrated, who was cut up, who was brutal. And they said, well, if you want to be free, if you want to exercise your rights as a man, this is what will happen to you. So I'm somewhat angry. I got a chip on my shoulder, and rightfully so, because the history of this is continuing it on today. And we see it with young black men being murdered in the streets, young women in their apartments. It's the same soup warmed over and over and over and over again. It's not a white and black issue. It is a factual issue. I'll only deal with the facts. Forget about he's white, he's black, he's Jewish, he's German, he's Spanish. No, forget that. Let's talk about the facts. This happened. These things happen when we have to correct them, period. Bras Coupé is a good example of what can happen to a person who is defiant. Bras Coupé had a master, his name was William Dubai. William Dubai bought Bras Coupé. Bras Coupé's original name was called Squire. And Squire would leave the plantation whenever he wanted to and travel to other places in the South and into the bayous and into the swamplands, where he eventually became leader of all the Maroons. And there were white Maroons there also. So, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but there's the book. It was written by a guy named Brian. His name is Brian Wagner, and he's a young guy that just compiled these stories. That's it.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. Thanks for your answer. Is anyone else? Would anyone else like to ask our guests a question? I think it's a good time for us to take a short break, play a little music. When we come back, we're gonna get Brian and Eric into the conversation a little bit more and talk about the bridge, or not even the bridge, but the logical reason how New Orleans music is evolving to something like what Brian has presented to us and to the world in the last month. So bear with me a second. I'm going to see if I can do these changes and play a little bit of music. I'm going to, just to preface it, I'm going to play a song that is actually 3 songs combined. This original basis of this song is from a woman named Sister Gertrude Morgan. It was recorded in New Orleans in the late 60s or early 70s. It was added to by King Britt and Tim Motzer from Philadelphia, and then further added to by a rapper from New Zealand. So you're hearing 3 layers history from history to history is all I'll say. So let me see if I can make this change.
I got a new world in my view. Lord, my journey I pursue. I said I'm running for the city. I got the new world in my view. I got the new world in my view. Oh, my journey I pursue. Lord, I'm running for the city. I got the new world in my view.
They ain't got no muscle, no hustle, no backbone. I stand alone, not tripping. Just saying, I'm different. Ain't hanging on to the coattails of the next man. Passport in my left hand, thinking that you are next. Heck, hope you ain't holding your breath, man. Cause I'm out here, I'm hungry. I don't play around, trust me. Ain't had as much drive since my Honda Civic got rusty. And my girl said that she loved me. It's funny, just thinking back. Study hard for that 9 to 5 like I thought that I should be good with that. It was dreaming, still dreaming. Spotlight on me like Willie Beeman. Still performing like Al Pacino. Instagram and tuxedos with my peoples. We growing up, still don't seem like we slowing up. 10 squad, we throwing up. Every time that we showing up. Get it while I'm living. All I ever hear is the clock tick. So I'm about my business and I'm running. I'm running.
Yeah.
They don't want to give it up. We gon' make it happen. Get it while I'm living. All I ever hear is the clock tick, tick, ticking. So I'm about my business and I'm running with it now. They don't wanna give it up, we gon' make it out. It don't get no greater, feel like I'm on fire. Feel like I'm Johnny Storm, feel like I'm volatile, explosive. Get close enough, you'll notice. Your girl act out of character when she see me approaching. Ain't poaching, I'm just saying, it's nothing. You punching above your weight, I'm something. She ain't seen no substitute in the 18. That's BA, Baracus, that BS, that whackness. Get no play in my axis, make them jump like AJ Hackett. Guarantee you, in these boots, they couldn't walk 1 mile. Really need to go and hang it up like a drunk doll. So behind the times, they should probably rock a sundial. Shattering their dreams, I can make big puns small. Music from the soul, don't need them to help me. If they fiending for the flash, they should take another selfie. Said I'm running like Mo Farah, so dapper. Swear the whole world can go against me, it don't matter, man. Get it while I'm living. All I ever hear is the clock tick, tick, ticking. So I'm about my business and I'm running with it now. They don't wanna give it up, we gon' make it out. Get it while I'm living. All I ever hear is the clock tick, tick, ticking. So I'm about my business and I'm running with it now. They don't wanna give it.
All right, and we're back from our break. I'm here joined with the masters, Mr. Bill Summers, Chief Christian Scott aTunde Adjuah, Brian Danos, Eric Heigle, and of course, Mr. Lewis Marks in the virtual room, and all of our guests here, both on streaming live and here in the Ropeadope Lounge in the metaverse. I want to welcome everybody back. We just heard Running by David Dallas, as Lewis alluded to before the break. You know, that track was compiled of Sister Gertrude Morgan taking that song by King Brit, Tim Motzer out of Philadelphia, and then finally put together by Mr. David Dallas from New Zealand. And I want to welcome everybody back. This conversation, guys, just on a personal tip, I'm learning so much, and I really appreciate, again, your voices and what you're saying, what you represent, and just giving the education that we all need, you know, telling the story that's not been told from your perspective and from your experiences. And I'm humbled by that. Lewis, I know I'm going to bring it back to the virtual room. I know you wanted to queue up this segment of this conversation to bridge the I'll take a term that Bill used earlier, forward back.
Yeah. I mean, Mr. Brian Danos is in the room, and Brian has a new record out under the band name Vela. Somebody's got a phone call.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. Let me cut the phone off.
It's not me, Bill.
It was me.
No. I meant I'm not calling you. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. I mean, I thought that was a good transition when I thought about the Vela record, which, you know, it's clearly stated that it's a New Orleans record, and there are some tracks on there where you'll hear some of what you would ordinarily expect from New Orleans, but we hear a lot of electronic and a lot of different sound. So I thought that Runnin' would be an interesting transition because that also is a track that took old tradition from New Orleans, added some, you know, at the time that Tim Motzer and King Britt did their thing, it was almost blasphemous, right? To go ahead and put these electronic sounds on top of this, you know, vocal with tambourine. And then, of course, when we got the track from David Dallas and he wanted to rap on top of both of those. But each person in the process has been able to understand and respect the tradition and create something new and exciting. And that's, you know, Chief and Bill, in your careers, you are doing that. But then I want to talk about, you know, what it's like for Brian. So Brian, I want to throw it to you and to Eric, who produced this record. What were you thinking about tradition, and why is electronic music a part of New Orleans now?
Yeah, I'm so thankful to be a part of conversations like this because, just as Eric said, even though grow up here in New Orleans, the history we were told was not the true way the history actually took place, and the legacy was kind of surface level of what we were taught. And so we've, you know, I've had to do my also digging, but there's so much more for me to learn about what actually happened in New Orleans. But you know, my background is I always grew up, you know, I played horns and guitar, but I always loved sounds. So I was always the guitar player with a bunch of pedals and trying to make this guitar not sound like a guitar. And that led me to like electronic music, you know, because with synthesizers, you have, you know, the world of opportunities to create sounds. And, you know, in New Orleans, we have an amazing hip hop community that's been using electronic instruments, you know, merging it with more, you know, the traditional New Orleans rhythms and horns. And the world I'm coming from is more like a down-tempo electronic dance world, where we've had some experiments with that. But that my outlook on this was trying to take performances from some amazing local musicians and then process them in unique ways to make them sound synthetic and electronic. Kind of in a collaboration with, you know, what computers can do and electronics can do with live performances on traditional instruments, using traditional rhythms and traditional, you know, structures like, you know, the trumpets and trombones and saxophones. That was kind of the outlook of the album. And Eric, you know, was an amazing resource to meet. Knows everybody in the city. And we got some incredible musicians like Nicholas Payton, Alvin Ford Jr., you know, Maggie Kerner, 7 Niners Gang. It was amazing collaborating with those people and bringing them and showing them what's possible with modern technology of how to process sounds and make it sound unique in a different way.
Eric, I was looking at your history. You were there in Lafayette at Dockside when Snarky Puppy recorded Tell Your Friends. I saw your credit there.
Yeah, that was like very, very, very interesting process. Michael called me maybe 2 weeks to a month out, and he had the dates, and he knew what the dates had to be. And so I recommended Dockside because I love that studio, and they also needed accommodations for whatever 10 musicians, 12 musicians. And so I recommended Dockside, and then it wasn't until the night before the session that they finally sent an input list. And it was it was like 85 channels. And I was like, whoa, hold on, bro.
Oh, God.
We're gonna have to do some massive recon here, because you're walking into a 40 channel console and I'm not even sure they all work, bro. Legitimately, like stayed up like all night, you know, figuring that out. And I was familiar with the band, but they certainly weren't the band that everybody knows now in terms of popularity and stature. It was one of their early recordings, and you know, straight away, if you get like, that's the real deal. They're gonna sound good if you put your iPhone in the room. Like, they're real people playing real music with dynamics and feeling. And so you got to kind of get past these little technical, you know, roadblocks and realize, like, okay, there's something that's more important at play here, and that's communicating the emotion of the composition, really. And Michael is a brilliant composer and producer and leader. And so, you know, Eric Hartman was also a part of that, you know. Bless him. What an amazing cat.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was my experience with Snarky Puppy. And a little like side piece to that project, which is kind of a funny story, that I did it for $50 a day. And I said, here's the deal, Mike. You and Sput owe me a session. You guys are killer players. Just play on a record for me as the rhythm section, to which they agreed. And so fast forward like a year later, they're like, okay, man, we're in New Orleans on this date. We got 24 hours. And so I arranged for this artist I'm producing from Charlottesville to come down. And I'm like, we got him from 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, and we got him for 24 hours. And we literally worked for 24 hours straight. They took breaks, they took naps, but I didn't leave the chair. And I was like, wow, those guys are really gonna hate me for this, you know. I literally said a day, and it was quite the opposite. Michael League and Robert Seawright were like, bruh, you're crazy, man. That's crazy, but the shit is badass, and mad respect. And so we've had a great relationship ever since. Thankfully, they didn't see that as me taking advantage of the deal. They were like, no, we said we'd make the album, and we had 24 hours, and we literally worked for 24 hours straight.
That's amazing. It's the thing I've learned, you know, when the heart is there and when the feeling is there, there's just no end to the energy that musicians and those around them will put into it. So how did you connect with Brian? And if you could talk a little bit about this project, the Vada project, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
We have a mutual friend in the group Generationals. Generationals is a New Orleans-based indie rock pop band. They're fantastic, actually. And I've done a bunch of work for them over the years. And so when Brian asked them for a recommendation, I was the one that they mentioned. And, you know, our first meeting, he expressed his concept and just started rattling off names of players in town that he was interested in working with, and I knew all of them, the drummers and the horn players that he was interested in pulling in, and so immediately the logistical side of it could happen, but to me it's like, is it good or is it not good, you know? And Brian makes good music, you know. It's thoughtful, it's well composed, it's got intention, and he's willing to put in the time and the work to try and make something truly unique and great. And so it was a no-brainer, a bit of a no-brainer to go forward with it, because, you know, it's just a cool project to be a part of, really.
Nice. Thank you so much. We are going to go out in a little bit with a track from Brian's album. But I want to open it up to the audience one more time. I want to see if anyone else has any questions for the panel, for these wonderful musicians who have given us their time. If you do have a question, please raise your hand.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, gosh, what can I say? This is there's still a little bit of processing that goes on with this whole thing. I would like to hear from the panel in general, and you can go in order as you like. How does this interaction feel to you? Like, is it super strange, or is it really interesting, or somewhere in between?
Looks like you may have a question behind you.
Oh. No, that's a no. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, this is really cool for me. I can't wait to get like the Oculus or whatever gadgets I will need to jump into this environment in a different way. But it's really cool kind of seeing it from this perspective. And I'm just looking forward to kind of digging in and learning more. I do think that having a conduit like this or a reservoir like this for discussion that allows folks to be able to potentially come in as avatars, so where so many of the sort of social things that can impede our ability to effectively communicate is really cool. So just experiencing this the first time, I'm looking forward to being able to get back into an environment like this and converse with people and have an open dialogue about some of the things that need to shift in this space without having to worry about some of the things that usually plague those things. So I'm looking forward to more of this.
Fascinating. Thank you. Bill Summers.
Yeah, well,
What do you think?
this is some good shit.
All right.
If I could just tell you the truth. Hey, Brian, Eric, and Christian. Hey man, I'd like to do a free track for all of you. If you ever need some percussion. And
yes, please.
I would no, I think that people need to understand that we're not musicians. I'm not a musician, I'm a physician. And I heal people with my sound. And I know that we can do that. And we can heal the planet. We can have something to do to bring peace and harmony between all races and all people if we put our minds to it. So you know what? A lot of people spend money on building bombs of destruction. I'd like to get with these three gentlemen and build a love bomb made out of notes. And we can do it. No, that's not a whim. That's a reality. It's possible. Hey man, I want y'all to see this though. You see this right here?
Yes, sir.
You know who this is? Yeah. You got one arm. This is the only statue made for Bra Coupe ever.
Wow.
Okay? This is the only one on the planet Earth. And this is my man. Hey, look, guys, I love this. I think doing this, you have no idea how important of a thing that you're actually doing, that Ropeadope is doing, Fabian, Louis, you guys are on another universe, okay? I would love to participate again.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And Brian and Eric, let's go Brian first. Any final comments?
Well, Bill, I'm definitely going to take you up on that. I agree. I think, music brings everybody together, right?
Hey man, just send me the track and I will do it in my studio and I'll send you the stems. Right, you know how we do it now.
Right on. Yeah.
We won't need 80. We won't need 80 channels either.
No, we don't need. We don't need 80.
Damn, Eric.
That's funny. Yeah, and thank y'all to Ropeadope. Like, I'm super excited about the future of this space. You know, being able to interact with people from all over the world. You know, playing concerts in the metaverse, or having these panels. It's exciting what's about to come for musicians and creators.
Guess that's on me. This is truly fascinating. Well curated. I love the people that you've picked. I have come to realize I do need to brush up on my history a bit. I need to read more books. I spend so much time making music. I literally fill my schedule on a regular basis. I need to carve out some time and really dig a little deeper in that regard. In terms of the metaverse, do bubbles float upward in the metaverse? I'm generally curious, like the hearts, the stuff coming up from the avatars.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Are those like light equivalent of likes, like the hearts coming up right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Can we get a like right now to confirm that these are likes? There we go. All right, ma'am in the middle. She's
indeed.
Okay, kill it.
All right. Now we're setting it off.
Those are loves.
Hey, Bill, same thing goes, man.
Those are
Anything
loves,
you
yeah.
need. I had like we could even just do a track, the four of us, you know, make it a thing.
Hey man, look, I think that the greatest thing that could come out of this meeting today is that we record something together. So I don't need no money. Fuck the money.
I like it.
Amen.
Yeah.
Let's do
That's
it.
a slogan right there. We're gonna
Fuck
pass.
the
We're gonna
money.
pass the mic over to this wonderful person over here. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, you guys. First off, what's up, Christian? It's Latasha.
Oh, what's happening, Latasha?
I
Great
was just trying to ask
great
you
musician and
about-
composer, y'all. Really great. Go ahead. Sorry.
Thanks. I was just trying to wonder, like, you know, how you feel about the New Orleans tradition that seems to have popped up of trumpet players going from just completely analog to being, you know, both analog and, you know, using pedals like you do, or what Terrence does, or like how Nick's doing his thing, because you know, I'm now doing that now. So like, I'm trying to figure out where you came from with it.
Well, I think, you know, actually to hearken to something that, you know, that both Brian and Eric also intimated earlier when we were speaking about, you know, moving from that kind of sound space to the modern sound space. You know, it's all frequency, right? So it's like, I think in general as New Orleanians, you know, whether or not you're out at a second line and you hear somebody playing I'll Fly Away, or if you're at the Heigle Lounge or we're in a space like that and somebody's playing some bounce music, the frequencies of the sounds, we're receptive people, right? You know, you're like water people, receptive, right? So it's like, to me, part of what I realized was that I was trying to communicate something to my peers, and so much of what my peers' musical diets were, and also people that were eventually ended up being younger than us. But when we were, you know, in our early 20s and trying to figure out what we wanted to do musically, so much of the diets of the listeners in our generation were wrapped around these, you know, popular music in the late 90s and the early 2000s had a very specific sonic architectural design, right? And to try to effectively communicate and compel a generation of younger people that were listening to those frequencies in a space where we were kind of playing quintet music, wasn't doing it in the way that that actually translated the fervor that we had about what it was that we were expressing. So we started to experiment. We started to put 808 and 909 sounds into sampling pads and modules, and going into clubs that were much too small and turning that shit as loud as we could turn it, and to see what that was going to do to people and how they would react. Actually, it was like the trumpet, the change for the trumpet was kind of the last one, because I had gone years. I'll never forget, I had experimented one time at Berkeley, and I had like a distortion pedal and some verb or something. And I was doing a recording with Gary Burton and Pat Metheny. And Pat was into it, but Gary was like, your sound is so pretty. Like, honestly, you could just play with nothing and I die every time. I just love your sound. Why are you covering it up with that shit? That was his comment. That was his comment. And to be honest with you, I think it probably took almost a decade, because I had so much respect for him. And also, my Uncle Donald was played in so many different contexts, but for him, it's about being able, you're conjuring different things in those sounds. So when you're covering them up, in some ways you can be elevating those things, but in other ways, you can be covering up something that's really integral to communicating and affecting people. So it's like, I had this dance, for almost a decade. But I think what ultimately did it for me was just that, part of what I realized was that a lot of the sort of dogma around how we can come up, in certain sort of communal expressions in New Orleans, can't, even though the culture is so wide and so inclusive, some ideas can also be very closed, right? And I think because I came up in the way that I came up, which was almost like a pious relationship to the traditions and excavating and doing all of those things. But as I got older and digested more music, I realized that a lot of the things that I was holding on to weren't rules for our predecessors, right? So I go back and I listen to some spasm music records from the 1920s, or I listen to like Charlie Patton's recordings or whatever, maybe in the 1930s. And the whole thing is distorted, right? And so it's like getting out of that mindset that says that it had to be one way, and trying to figure out for what it was that we wanted to communicate, what was the best way to effectively communicate. And once that becomes the priority, then the other, you should do this or shouldn't do that, that stuff starts to go away.
Hey, could I jump in and say something? I got to say this. I want to share something that relates to what you said, Christian.
Yes, sir.
When I traveled on a tour with Herbie Hancock. Now, Herbie Hancock is a tech freak. Okay, every time something new came out, Herbie had it first. Okay, we went on a tour in Europe. We did a record called Feats Don't Fail Me Now, and another record called Sunlight, where Herbie started using a vocoder. Okay, now you guys know what a vocoder is, I'm sure, but one thing that was happening that relates directly to what you're saying, Christian. Now check this out. We did a tour in England and then went to mainland Europe. Every venue that we played in England, from London to Liverpool, people threw stuff at Herbie when he started to sing through the vocoder. Every night, I'm talking about every night, bar none, every hall we went to, we had two sets. One set was completely acoustic with the old Herbie Hancock stuff, and the second set was the new Herbie Hancock. And as soon as he said, "I thought it was you," into the vocoder, the lettuce, the tomatoes, the apples, and the oranges started to fly. Now, it seemed like the people from the UK called France and said, "Go to the grocery store and get your lettuce and tomatoes ready." Because when we got to France, man, so there that thing of people have to accept change. They have to be able to relate and bring the things of the past and marry it to the future. This is nothing but an aunt recognizing a cousin or a nephew. It's the same family.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want to go back to the time when produce was cheap enough to throw.
Well, they were throwing a lot of
Throwing
fruit.
tomatoes. I need them.
But you know, I think part of what's so beautiful about what's being intimated there, and also food for thought, is that, you know, sometimes as artists, just because we're in a space where we have shifted also doesn't mean that what it is that we're communicating is going to be accepted. It's like any conversation. Even this conversation could have went that way, you know. But the point is to try and sharpen the things around what it is that you're expressing, so that you can communicate. Because look, you know, I have music. You know, I got a lot of flack years ago. I released a song. There was a song on one of my records that was called Ku Klux Police Department. The record was called Yesterday You Said Tomorrow. And the introduction was supposed to mirror what it feels like being in those kinds of situations, and the sort of social and also mammalian kind of, you know, between mammal and mammal, the kinds of energies that are going back and forth when you have a man that feels as though he can take your life and time away from you at any moment. And so what it was that I wanted to express in that moment was built to give people, you know, a very guttural and visceral reaction that they would not like, right? So the point is like, you know, I think a lot of times we think about music in these linear ways to where it's like it's supposed to be this or it's supposed to communicate that. But the point is that our experiences and our lives are so dynamic that having, what I found is really great about having the sonic architect, building a sonic architectural acumen and touching the electric versus the analog and all these things, is that it allows you to curate the story and the narrative in just the right way for what it is that you want to communicate. Whether or not that's something that's going to be off-putting to an audience member, or it's something that is going to be palatable to them. I think, you know, obviously each composer is going to have their own approach, but just to get to finish rounding out Latasha's question, you know, I think it's important to also be willing to shake the edges of the cage as well, you know. If we all just sit comfortably and say, well, this is what a good sound is and this is what a bad sound is, and that's where we're gonna leave it, then what's the point in communicating anything at all, right? Because some of the things that I'm gonna tell you about my life are going to be heartbreaking. Some of them you're going to find joy and synergy, and some of them you might find frightening. The point is that in order to effectively communicate that, I need to try and have as many tools at my disposal to be able to do that as possible, you know, if I'm a person that wants to effectively communicate. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. You know, I'm just so impressed and so thankful to all of you for being here. For you know, it's this really interesting process of sort of like digging through the past for the truth while pushing towards the future, and you're all masters at it. I think we can all learn from that, because you're not just trying new things. You're looking back for the true history at the same time. That's what impresses me the most. I just, you know, we're gonna. I could stay all night, but I think we're just gonna have to do this again. And I just kind of want to do this. Say thank you for being here. I'm so honored to be a part of your worlds. I'm gonna play a song from the Vela record. You guys can tune in. The unfortunate part about this is that I cannot come and hang with you on Zoom. I'm gonna hang here in the room. Fabian's gonna hang with you. I'll play a little music, and then we'll, you know, after that you guys can still hang, and I'll be hanging out with folks here. And please come back. This is fun. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. We had the Baba Bill Summers in the metaverse with us, man. I'm just like floored right now.
Well, you know, Baba Bill is crazy as hell.
Oh, let's get it. But a legend and a chief. Thank you, Baba.
Thank you. I love you guys. I love every last